Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. My name is Priscilla Hennicum. I am here in Charles Melton with Charlie Melton. How are you today?
I'm well. It's been a great rainy day, which at this time of the year is perfect.
So, tell me about where Charles Melton is located.
We are in probably the best known wine area in Australia, the Barossa Valley, the beautiful Barossa Valley. It's in South Australia, a little inland, but it's a very historical area, one of the oldest grape growing areas in Australia, and certainly probably the best known area overseas or around the rest of the world if you're talking Australian wine areas. And of course I have the belief that all the great wine areas in the world start with a B. Of course, Barossa, Barolo, Bordeaux, Burgundy. So there is a pattern there. So we're in one of the beautiful grape growing areas of the world that start with B.
And beautiful Barossa, that's all matching.
That's right. So yeah.
Tell us the secret of Barossa. What having in the soils and the climate here then that's making so great wines?
I think one of the great assets of the Barossa is the old vine material. We haven't had in Australia to any large extent, there's a little in Victoria, but phylloxera, which was one of the great problems of wine in Europe back in the 1800s, we've never had that here in South Australia. So many of the vines that are still in the ground have been there for, in some cases, over 150 years, over 1.5 centuries, that same vine's been growing. We have our own vineyard on our own estates. We have vineyards that have been around for 100 years. And so I think that the age of those vines helped create just a real depth and power in the wines. And generally, the reason they're still in the ground after 100 years or 150 years is because they make great wine. If they weren't making great wine, they would have been pulled out of the ground a long time ago. So not always, but in most cases, if it's a very old vineyard, there's a reason it's still surviving, and the reason is that it makes some great wine. So that's one of our key assets, I think, here in the Barossa.
Yeah, it's incredible. So many vineyards with 100, 150 years old here. It's very nice. So tell us how many hectares or acres, if you prefer, of land do you have here?
If I'm talking to people around the world, we'll talk in hectares. We have about 35 hectares of estate vineyard. And then we have 2 other small vineyards that we purchase some very special grapes off, that we've been buying those grapes for the last 30 years of 2 growers. But most of our wine is made from grapes off our own estates. So it's a medium-sized holding, generally 35 hectares in Australia.
What type of wine you do? I know you are one of the best producer, or probably one of the best well-known producers for making GSM, right? So you have quite a well-known GSM here, Ninepops. Do you want to talk a little bit the story about the name, please?
Well, I've gotten over any embarrassment about it now because it's been so successful. But when I first, many decades ago, started drinking Chateau Neuf de Pape, which of course is the famous French, Grenache-based wine, I always thought Chateau, and having done my normal 6 weeks Alliance Française French course, I knew that Neuf was 9, Pape was Pope, and Chateau, I thought, oh, well, that's got to be castle. So I thought it meant the castle of the 9 popes. But of course, as I learnt later, Neuf means new and 9. And it's actually the new castle of the popes, or the castle of the new pope. So that's how 9 popes came about. It was just pure ignorance of the French language, of which, and many people would say I still haven't improved my French speaking skills. But it is based, whilst the name had a bit of levity and perhaps a touch of not so serious about the name, the wine itself is made from, as I say, our very oldest 100-year-old Grenache vineyards. And it is a unique Australian recognition of the Chateauneuf style. We grow the grapes in the same manner as we call them bush vines here in Australia, but in Europe they would be called gobelet vines. So they're untrellised, and they just give such high quality fruit grown in that form. But so it really is a bit of a homage to Chateauneuf-du-Pape, but now Ninepops. We sell Ninepops all around the world, and it is probably our best known wine all over the world. And I have been told in some very famous winemakers' cellars in France, you will find the odd bottle of Ninepopes. So it is getting around.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very well-known wine here in Australia. So tell us about you making reds and rosé as well. Yeah, so we have the rosé, the Rose of Virginia as well as another very well-known wine.
Yeah, Rose of Virginia is again, we've been making rosé now for 35 years. Rose of Virginia is named after my wife, Virginia. So if I do another podcast next year and it's Rose of Suzanne or something, you'll know there's been a problem. But but I still currently and thankfully will into the future be Rose of Virginia. So it's a serious dry Provence style rosé, again Grenache based. But yeah, I guess we started making rosé back when, certainly in Australia, rosé has not been considered a serious wine. It certainly is these days, but back in the mid '80s, it wasn't really. There was either rosé was sweet, or it was fizzy, and sometimes both fizzy and sweet. Yeah. So a proper serious dry rosé was a very rare thing back in 1985. There were only about half a dozen winemakers in the country who were making serious dry rosé. So it's become a very popular wine for us, again, all around the world. The colour of Rose of Virginia, which is a super vibrant, almost cerise, that sometimes causes some of our European customers to raise an eyebrow because it's not the pale Provençal sort of rosé colour. But it's now become almost a wine style in its own unique right. So we wouldn't ever change the colour of it. And it's just perfectly natural colour we get from the old vine vineyards, because even with the rosé, many of the vineyards are 50 to 75 years old. So it's made from quite old vine material.
And then a lot of Shiraz, I guess, and father-in-law, that's probably one of your very well-known Shiraz, and he and Charles Melton.
Yeah, I mean, father-in-law.
Why the name, by the way? Everyone want to know.
Well, for many people who have a father-in-law, my father-in-law was a farmer, a wheat and sheep farmer with a very large property that has been in Virginia's family for 150 years. But when he retired off the farm, he wanted to plant a vineyard, and of course, he came to me to give him some help in planting the vineyard. And the only problem was he wanted to plant it in the Clare Valley as opposed. Now, the Clare Valley is a wonderful place also to make wine, a lovely, lovely Australian wine, another winemaking region, but it's not the Barossa. See, it doesn't start with a B, it starts with a C, so that rules them out straight away. But so all of a sudden, and it's very hard for those of you who've been married as long as I have to tell your father-in-law to bugger off, you don't want to buy his grapes from the vineyard he's planted. So he had to make a wine that was a blend of Clare Valley and Barossa Valley wine using my father-in-law's grapes. So I thought that was the name I was going to give the wine, seeing as I was basically forced to make it. Now, thankfully, the vineyard he planted was a superb quality vineyard. Not that I ever told him that, because he would have charged me more for the grapes that he was growing, so I didn't ever tell him that. But it is a superb vineyard, and it turned into a very, very popular, in fact, our biggest selling red wine around the world and around the country. So it's a unique style, but that's where the name came from, because my father-in-law's grapes make up a big portion of the wine.
never forget that story. Like all the great regions start with B. I will start to talk at the same story now. So tell us, do you sell a lot of your wines in Australia or overseas, and how much do you sell in Australia? How much do you sell overseas?
Yeah, we're probably 60 or 70% in Australia, and then the balance of it overseas. We've been selling overseas for close to 30 years now. We started off in England, but we have a number of countries in Europe who buy our wine, as well as obviously Asia, given our location. But it's an important market for us because often to be selling wine in Europe it does two things. It gives us a lot of feedback on our wine style, because if we were just to sell in Australia, there is a chance you develop a seller palate by only selling to customers who have an expectation of a particular style. But when you sell wine all around the world, you get a lot of feedback from people who, thankfully mostly positive, but it also causes you to look at a lot of overseas wines. And so we have probably adjusted our winemaking style to take into account some of the palate preferences of our European customers. Not that we've changed a lot, they are still resolutely Australian and certainly resolutely Barossa, which is a unique style. And then within that, as you will find in Europe, we've developed a very distinctive house style, cellar style. It's something that people can recognise our cellar style, if they're an experienced taster, and that's quite important to us. Rather than just make wine that could be from anywhere or could be from any maker, we really want to, in that European tradition, have a very distinct cellar style, and I think that's what we've worked on with our Shiraz.
So whereabouts can I find your wine around the world?
Gosh, certainly UK, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Lithuania, Denmark, and then through a little problem with China at the moment, but we're hoping that's temporary. But most of Asia, most of the countries in Asia, a little in the US, Canada, quite a few.
A lot of the place. That's good. So tell us a little bit about you. Tell us your first memory relevant to wine. So when you actually had the first moment with wine?
Oh, gosh. I didn't come from a big wine drinking family, to be honest. I guess one of the very early pivotal moments was when I first started working for Peter Lehman, who is a legendary figure. Unfortunately, the late Peter Lehman now, but he was a legendary figure in Australian wine. And he opened a bottle. We had some guests to entertain, and the senior winemaker wasn't available. He was off somewhere, and so I was asked to come along and help entertain a leading journalist. And it was very early in my career, and he opened a bottle of Chateau Palmer from Bordeaux, and I have to say that was just I suspect it was probably the first Bordeaux I'd ever tasted, I think, and it had a powerful impact on me on the longevity, because it was a great vintage from Chateau Palmer in the 1960s, so it was already very old. And that was certainly a pivotal wine moment that caused me to think about how wine is not just merely a drink. It takes into account a lot of history. When you drink, and I know a lot of people drink wine very young, but I'm a fan of old wine, partly because I like the flavours, but also partly because when I open a bottle, there's a little history attached to it, and events surrounding the vintage year, always have some resonance, and obviously some years more so than others, but I think it's really important to give wine some age, and so that when you pull that bottle out, there are a lot of memories associated with it. And so therefore we make wine that we know will last 20, 30, 40 or 50 years. It's important to us. So we can pull out now at least 30-year-old wine that is still a beautiful drink, and that's important for us to be able to do that.
Just to keep the quality for a long time. It can be aging as well. So that passion started from there. The wine passion started after you start to work in Pitalina.
Well, I worked for Peter for quite a number of years. First at Saltram's in the Barossa, again a famous wine name that's been around for 150 years or so. And then Peter, we all resigned from Saltram's in 1979. And we went and built the new Pitalina winery. So I was with Peter for quite a few years after that. And then we started our own Charles Melton vintage. Our first vintage was 1984. So we've been going now.
You just tell everyone your age. You know that?
Well, no, I'm not going to tell them how old I am. But I did start young. But I can tell them in 2023 will be my 50th vintage. So I'll have done 50 vintages by 2023. So I'll leave all your listeners to work out how old I think I am.
Do you believe in a perfect variety, Charlie?
No, I don't. I mean, I am a massive fan of great Pinot Noir. I love Pinot Noir. But we've tried planting Pinot Noir in the Barossa, and it simply just makes very ordinary wine. I don't think there's a perfect variety. There's a perfect variety in a particular place. But even within the Barossa, some of the Grenache we may grow on our soil, you could move that Grenache 5 kilometres up the road and it won't work anywhere near as well. So I think the word perfect comes when you, by luck, sometimes by knowledge, but more often than luck, you plant the particular variety that is perfectly matched to the soil you've put it in. And as I say, I know there's a lot of scientists out there and a lot of agronomists who will say that comes down to knowledge, but there's an awful lot of luck involved in it as well. And that's perfect when you match the perfect variety to the perfect soil and climate, and then you'll get, well, I don't know whether they ever get perfect wine, but you'll get a great wine.
Step of the winemaker. You need like 54 vintage before you make good wines.
That's right, yeah. So, and the winemaker has a minor impact on all of that. Yeah.
Are you social geek? Do you like any particular Facebook, Instagram? You like any social media stuff? You a big fan of social media?
Well, two things. I have very good social media people who work for me, and a very famous politician in Australia who when someone asked him about his social media or his tweets, his comment was, "Not only do I not write them, I don't read them." And so I would fall into that category. Yeah.
So social media not for you, Charlie.
Yeah, that's correct.
How much is your cellar most expensive bottle? Do you have a cellar at your home?
Yeah. We have
probably some Bordeaux wines after that story you just told me before.
Well, in actual fact, we bought from 1982 and 1983 many Bordeaux on indent and brought them into Australia when the exchange rate was very good, and we landed. We didn't buy first growth, but many second and third growths. Canon, Montreux, La Villascas. We landed them on average in our cellar at home for 15 Australian dollars a bottle, believe it or not, back in the 80s. And I don't know what they're worth now. A bottle of 1982 La Villascas is worth, quite a lot of money, but unfortunately we've drunk many of them. But that would probably, the oldest wine I've had was a wonderful 1898 Burgundy. So it was 100 years old when we drank it in 1998, and that was
How was that?
It was for 5 minutes. It was sensational, but only for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, it had gone. But so I tend to not buy old expensive wine. I tend to try and buy wine when it's younger, and therefore better value, and then keep it long enough that it becomes,
That's a good idea. Just imagine, Charlie, people overseas drink your wine. That person could be like a VIP person, a famous person. So just imagine someone drinking Charles Melton overseas and a VIP person and being magazine everywhere. So who would you like to see in a magazine when you're reading with a bottle of Charles Melton?
Well, in my dreams, only because I would picture it as a picture of myself would be George Clooney. But but thankfully this is a podcast and not a telecast. Otherwise they would see how dishonest I would be dreaming that it was a picture of me instead of George Clooney. But yeah, George Clooney would be good, sitting there with a lovely glass of Charles Melton Shiraz. Yeah. Perfect.
Tell us, each vintage is a different story or not? Each vintage is a different story or not?
Totally. I mean, this last year, if you compare it to the 2 years before, it's it's just a radically different outlook, different style of wine. And this year we've had the best rains we've had prior, leading up to harvest we've had for many years. So we're expecting a great vintage again this year, hopefully. It is a different story. And again, that's why keeping wines in your cellar for quite a while is such an important thing, because when you go back, and I can almost remember every vintage of, the last almost 50 vintages, because each one had a distinctive characteristic about the vintage, which generally has translated into the wine. So when you pull out an old bottle of wine, the characters you see in that just remind you you reflect on the conditions of the harvest as well.
Do you have any vintages in your mind it was one of the most remarkable vintage for you? Like anything happened that year, or maybe challenge, or maybe fun factors, or anything you'd like to share? Like each vintage was that?
Well, probably two in a bad sense. The very first vintage that I did was 1974, where it rained every day, and it is considered one of the least successful vintages in the Barossa in the last 35 years or 40 years. It just rained. It didn't stop raining every day. It just rained.
Harvesting grapes in the rainy day.
Harvesting grapes every day in the rain. It was just terrible. And then you get a year, even like last year, or this year, 2021, the harvest this year was the most mild but sunny, without any heat. Just a wonderful harvest conditions. We think it's probably the best odd year vintage since 1991. In the Barossa, there's been a pattern of the great vintages are the even years. 1976, 1982, 1996, 1998, 2002. But 2021 is a beautiful odd year vintage, a great odd year vintage.
So please, everyone, 2021, buy a bottle, try some of Charles Melton 2021 vintage. Tell us, when you're very little, what do you want it to be when you grow up? Always a winemaker, viticulture, or?
Not so much. I went to agricultural college. I always wanted to be a farmer, but originally I would have assumed I was going to farm sheep or cattle, but in the end we ended up farming grapes. So so it's still farming, but so there was always a farming. My father came off from a farming family in New South Wales, so there was always going to be a farming element, but as I say, not farming grapes didn't really enter into my head at agricultural college.
And then how coming across your mind to actually build a winery for you? And then what's actually happened to you? I wanted to make my wines.
I guess, sometimes in life it's the people whose influence you come under that dictate the direction of life. And Peter Lehman was a fantastic mentor. And I guess watching Peter and his wife Margaret, the life they led because of wine was probably a very strong factor. And we now have it. Our daughter is a winemaker, and she will eventually take over the winemaking from me when I decide to step aside. So we've already got that generational continuation of our family, and we see that as very important. And our son is already involved in the business, and he will continue to have an expanded role in the business when he finishes university. But yeah, so we would see ourselves as we hope, a generational wine company with a number of generations, not just the second generation that's already started, but we would hope that our children's children would continue on, and so on. So, it's in Australia, it's not always the case. There are very few long-term generational family wineries. Henschke's, Yalumba are two great examples in the Barossa where we would use them as a model. We would like to think that in 150 years' time, Charles Melton will still be a family wine company.
Yeah, it's always a beautiful story when you see families still keep going in the business and that thing. So tell us, how many glasses or bottle of wine are needed to get you drunk? Tell the truth, Charlie.
Well, it's generally we have a monthly lunch with the same group of winemakers, every month or so. I don't know, because by the time I get
1, 2, 3 bottles, 4.
One or two, and I'm pretty relaxed. Yeah, one or two's enough. With a cognac and a beer,
Yeah, so you need a little bit before the wine, and after is.
That's right. Exactly. So, and that's the problem. If I didn't have the beer and the cognac, I'd be fine. It's the one before and the one after that do the damage.
And what do you do for recover next day? Coffee?
No. Go to get back out in the vineyard and go to work in the vineyard. It clears the head very quickly. Yeah, clears the mind and clears the sinuses.
When you're not working, Charlie, what do you like? What do you do? What do you spend your free time? Do you have free time, by the way?
Yeah, we have had the Murray River, for all the listeners who aren't familiar with where the Barossa is not that far away, and it's Australia's largest and longest river. So we had an old wooden timber riverboat that we used to sail. We don't have it at the moment, but I'm aiming to get another one. So if I have spare time, I'd like to spend it on or near the water, either in a boat or on the beach. That's the only thing. If the Barossa was to be perfect, it just needed a river or a river running through it. Then it would be perfect. But
where did you go in your first date? You can tell about the Virginia when you went to. And did you have a wine that night? Do you remember?
We did. Well, I did. I met her at a wine function. So.
Oh, really?
Yes. So that's how it all started. Nearly 40 years ago, I did. I can't remember what horrible opening line I would have used, but I think, in fact, I can. I think it was, have you tried the de Bortoli's Noble One Sauternes? I think that was my opening line.
Oh, and she knew about the one?
No, but I thought it was a pretty stylish opening line anyway. But and it worked.
It worked very well. 40 years together.
That's right. Yeah.
And then what did you drink that night? Was Australia wine?
It was a great drink. We then went out to dinner afterwards, so we drank some other Italian wines in a lovely Italian restaurant. So there you go.
Yeah, that's good. And then that's how she got in love.
You might have to ask her all of that.
So, complete the sentence. A table without wine is like?
A table without wine, goodness. Wow, a table without wine would be really boring. Really boring. Sorry.
Yes, I agree. Do you have any good lucky ritual for when the harvest is about to start? ritual? Like you do anything before the harvest is coming? So you doing some party every year? You do anything every year before the harvest is started? Like a good luck for the vintage? You believe in that thing? So doing something every year to be able to get that good vintage?
No, you know what? We spent much of my time, as I say, to come in and talk to you. I've just come out of the vineyard. I spend a lot of time in the vineyard from very early in the season now. We've just had bud burst, so the new shoots are on. So I guess our main concern for our business every year, and it is the most important thing, is to make sure we have a crop of superb quality grapes. So that's where my energy goes. That's where my energy goes from now right through until February or March is just being in the vineyard, walking up and down the road, working in the rows, and you look at the health of pretty much most of the vines. We have some, 60, 70,000 vines, and before harvest starts I will have pretty much walked past every one of them a couple of times, just doing work and looking at them. So that's what I do pre-harvest.
You pretty much look after the vineyards. You almost go into vineyards every day to see like it's...
Certainly at this time of year. At this time of year, I'm pretty much out there every day. It's an important time of year just to look at the health of the vineyard. We do a lot of training. Because we have so much old vineyard, much of it can't be mechanised. Most of it can't be mechanised, so we have to do pretty much everything, not totally by hand as in the old days, but certainly old Grenache bush vines require a lot of gentle handwork rather than machinery going through it. So it takes a fair bit of time. Yeah.
What do you think people will be drinking in the future, like in 2300?
I think wine occupies everyone goes through drinking mixed drinks or coolers or spirits when they're younger. I think wine has a really sociable and historical thing about it that sets it aside from many other drinks. And I know probably the only other thing that comes close is, say, malt whiskey or cognac that has a similar sort of history. So wine, everyone starts off on, as I say, mixed drinks or coolers or whatever they call them these days. But generally, wine has a real social cohesion to it.
But do you think for wine, do you think people drink more white, rosé, sparkling, red?
Again.
Or everything?
Sparkling wine will always remain the celebratory drink. But really, if you're seriously drinking, you'd have to be drinking red wine, wouldn't you?
Tell a little bit about the biggest things about Australia now, the climate change, the climate problems now. Do you want to just give us a little bit overview about what do you believe, what are you doing in your vineyards for protecting yourself, not protected, but what you can do better for deal with the climate?
Well, I guess, like many producers, we're absolutely reducing any use of chemicals. We don't spray any synthetic chemicals of any sort on the vines, etc. The normal things of being mindful of, for instance, how many times we use tractors. If we can do it by only sending a tractor up and down a row once, that saves a lot of emissions, etc. So all of those things, like many wineries, that's important to us. Climate change is a very real thing. We notice it in the harvest, certainly in the harvest of the last 20 years. We've noticed a change in our picking times, a change in how the vines react. So it's front of mind, absolutely front of mind. And I guess like many businesses, we're not going to be able to make grand changes to the world, but if each of us does our own little bit in terms of sustainability, then hopefully collectively that will have some effect.
Yeah. So thank you so much, but still not finished yet. So I would like to ask you if you're ready for play a game with me.
Right, I'm ready.
So the game is I will tell you like a famous people, and then you need to tell me wine or grape, what you prefer. You choose if you prefer to say wine or grape. You match it with this famous person, and then tell us why, right? So I will start with some politician people. Let's talk about Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama? She would be a woman of obviously great intelligence. She would be, I'm sure, a white Burgundy drinker.
White Burgundy, why?
But not young white Burgundy. White Burgundy that has some age and has some nuance.
Yeah.
Has some real depth and distinction. I think she would be a white Burgundy, an aged white Burgundy drinker.
And distinctive.
Sorry.
So you'd be like something completely different, and a lot of opinions, a lot of style.
Yeah, a wine, in fact, a wine that does have an opinion. A wine that has an opinion like Michelle Obama would be a perfect match.
And someone like Nelson Mandela.
Well, see, Nelson, I'm trying to think of what Nelson, well, I guess for Nelson, it would undoubtedly have to be a South African wine. But again, maybe something uniquely South African, the Pinotage, because it's not grown very much. I know there's probably a little Pinotage around the world, but it seems to be a uniquely South African thing. So you would imagine, I'm trying to think, Canon Cop, which is one of the, I'm not a big fan of Pinotage, but I have tasted some old Canon Cop Pinotage, and they are amazing wines. So I think Nelson would have a good Canon Cop Pinotage.
A glass of Pinotage for Nelson Mandela. And then if you're going to the Queen.
Well, you're talking to an Australian Republican here, so I'm just assuming the Queen just drinks champagne for Levenses. Yes, yeah. Well, now
Dom Perignon.
Well, or now English sparkling wine.
Yeah, sadly now we have a lot of English sparkling wine there. And why do you think? Because she's like a glamour person?
Well, no, because she's the Queen, and she's probably one of the few that can drink champagne every day.
She has the money, yeah?
That's it. And the time. Yeah.
So let's go to talk about some singers. So Beyonce.
A little out of my age group. See, I would be thinking Beyonce. Gosh, hard-working girl. Obviously, she's been highly successful. But I'm thinking she might be a Sauvignon Blanc drinker.
Oh, right. Why? Because young and...
Yeah, because she's young and she's got so many other things to think about, in Los Angeles or, everything. She hasn't got time after she's done her Twitter feed and her Facebook and made a record. She can't have time to think too seriously about wine. So she would have a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah.
Easy drinking.
That's easy drinking.
Easy to choose. Yeah. So let's talk about something very relaxed, like Bobby Marley.
Bob Marley? Oh wow, see? No, he would be your aged Shiraz man.
Aged Shiraz, yeah.
Take it easy, take it slow. So yeah, I'm with Bob on that.
And some like Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt, wow, yeah, again. I wish you had have said George Clooney, then I would have been good.
Well, tell, then we're probably matching with you one of your wines, right?
Yeah, wow. Well, see, George would be good. George would be sitting there with a bottle of Ninepops. Brad Pitt, I'm thinking Brad Pitt would be kind of father-in-law guy. Again, I'm not sure that he would be as thoughtful as George. I think he would be more your father-in-law and kind of easy drinking, laid back, relaxed. So, yeah.
And is someone like very clever like Bill Gates? Do you think Bill Gates drink wine?
I'm saying this with no knowledge, but I don't think. I just can't imagine Bill Gates ever letting anything make him lose control.
That's so true. I don't think he can finish a bottle of wine.
I think Bill Gates would be sparkling mineral water man, not Barossa Shiraz man. I think, yeah.
You don't think you can sell wines to Bill Gates?
No, I don't think so.
You can't send like a box of wine for Bill Gates?
No, I think Bill would not want to have anything that might cause him to lose control. So, yeah.
This is sparkling water for him then, yeah. Sounds good. So thank you so much for that. And then just the last question. Did you enjoy your interview?
Fantastic. I love talking about wine. Interesting people and two interesting people. So,
give us a vote from 1 to 10.
Oh, well.
You can give 11 if you like.
No. See, 9 out of 10 because we've already discussed that we can't quite get to perfection on anything, wine or anything else. So I'm saying 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10.
Are you honest?
Yes, always.
Yeah. Are you sure?
Totally.
Thank you so much for that. But tell us about your website as well, so people can click in your website, and how we can actually reach your Salvador as well. How the people can come here to visit you in Salvador.
The website, if you just punch in Charles Melton from anywhere in the world, you'll get to our website. The only other person who you will be confused with is a famous American gridiron player called Charles Melton, but he doesn't make any wine, so forget him. Just come straight to our website. And we're open. The winery has a tasting room that's open 7 days a week.
So what time?
11 till 5. And we have a lovely big table you can sit around and enjoy a glass of wine.
And with a nice fire as well.
Yes, nice fire, beautiful outlook, surrounded by vines. That's all you see is a bottle of wine and vine.
And then with bush vines and old vines.
Yes, and puppy dogs as well. So that helps.
So how people can come here in Barossa? Tell what's the name of the address?
We're on Crondorf Road. So if you most people, can find Crondorf Road. It's well signposted, but generally just ask anyone where Crondorf Road is, and all the locals will be able to tell you, point you in the right direction.
Everyone knows about Charles Melton, right?
I would hope so. I dream of that day.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Have a great day.
Lovely. Good to hear.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack Australia. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.